My name is Albert, and this is not a full review of the XE4, but merely my opinion of what the XE4 is all about in relation especially to what has been said about it on most of the YouTube review videos. Firstly, I am not a seasoned YouTuber. I'm just using YouTube to convey my opinions about this camera. And to cut to the chase, point number one, a lot of reviewers were talking and complaining about the lack of buttons. In the first place, there is no rule that says that any camera must have a lot of buttons littered all over the camera, because a lot of buttons actually allows for more customization. And why do you need a lot of customization? It's because the menu system offers a lot of things. And why does the menu system offers a lot of things? Because the camera is basically stupid. It does not know what you want. The camera is flawed. All our cameras are flawed. That's why the camera needs to know a lot of things from you. For example, how you want the autofocus to behave. Is it single, continuous, or eye detect, or even, my goodness, animal detect? Or in the case of eye, is it the left eye or the right eye? You see, the camera is stupid. It does not know what you want. So it has to ask a lot of things from you, and you have to set it in the camera to tell it in detail what the hell you want it to do. And that's why the menu is so complicated and extensive, and Sony users will be very familiar with that. So basically, most cameras are dumb. So a camera like this, it is also no better, it is also dumb. It needs a lot of input from the owners as to what it needs to do. It is like a very stupid employee who needs to ask the boss, do you want your spreadsheet to be in portrait format or landscape format? Do you want me to use an A4 size paper or a bigger paper? The employee has to ask a ton of questions, and that basically shows everything. Now, back to the camera. So because all cameras are flawed, so most of the cameras would need to have a lot of buttons so that you don't need to go straight into the menu system to access all the functions. But in the case of this camera, okay, it was actually not targeted to Fujifilm users. Okay, Fujifilm users are not its core target market. Based on my understanding from the Fujifilm website and the videos in Japanese, this camera is actually targeted to a new group of users. Those who have not used digital cameras before, who never owned one, and they are not from the Fujifilm family. So this camera will be very appealing because of its minimalistic design. It is not intimidating for that type of user. So it does not require a lot of buttons. That is the first point. And if it doesn't have a lot of buttons, does it mean that it is not good? To me, that's totally not true. Because when you take any photos, it's mostly aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and focusing. And the focusing, as we all know it, is already done by the device, because most people, the majority of camera users, just do not like to do manual focus or don't know how to do manual focus, and they expect the camera to do all the focusing, which is why there's so much emphasis on autofocus systems, speed, the accuracy, the tracking, right down to asking you whether you want it to autofocus on your left eye or your right eye. So the autofocusing is already done for you. You just need to choose the shutter speed, the aperture, the ISO, and maybe the white balance. It's just 4 things. What else do you need? How many buttons do you need? Why do you need so many stuff? And also, like autofocus function on the XE3, before this model, there's an autofocus selector here that allows you to switch between manual, focus, and things like that. My question is, how often do you change so many parameters between each shot? Do you like for every 5 shots you have to go in and change a lot of things? Well, personally, I don't. So personally, again, for me, that's why I don't need a camera with a lot of buttons all over the place. You see, but of course, a lot of seasoned professionals or some hotshot photographers who have used Fujifilm before from the Fujifilm family, they might find that such a camera with hardly any buttons to lack credibility. The camera cannot make them look like a professional. I'm sorry to say that, but I'm convinced that this camera, the XE4, cannot project a professional image of its user because it looks so simple, minimalistic, hardly anything on it, hardly any buttons. This camera will not do any talking for you. If you need a camera with lots of buttons and bells and whistles, this is just not for you. But for me, it's just nice because when I shoot, I think only of shutter speed, aperture, ISO. That's it. And even ISO, it is set on auto ISO. So why do you need so many buttons littered all over the camera? And how often do you use those buttons to change your settings anyway, right? Now, the second point, which a lot of YouTube reviewers love to lambast this camera, is the EVF. And we all know that Fujifilm is a company that is very stingy with the EVF because it reserves only the good EVF, big, bright EVF for the flagship models. So naturally, this camera will not have a fantastic EVF because it is not a flagship camera and it doesn't cost as much as an X100V, all right? So a lot of people complain that the EVF is small, but when I use it, I don't see any issues at all because I wear glasses, so there's an eye relief, there's a distance, and there's nothing wrong at all. And I've used X-T4, I have also used the X-T30 before, and the X100V. My opinion is, if the viewfinder is too big, if the rectangle is too big, it could be a problem for glass users, for glass wearers, for eyeglass wearers, because you cannot see the edges, because the eye is quite a distance from the EVF. For myself, since I'm wearing glasses, no issues at all. At a comfortable distance from the camera, I can see the full rectangle itself, so I don't see what the issue is all about. But one thing is that the refresh rate is, of course, not its best. You know, I have also used a Lumix G9 before, and that has a wonderful EVF because I believe probably Lumix is not so stingy with their EVF. They give a great EVF on the G9 with a high refresh rate. But I don't whack around my camera like this, so the refresh rate doesn't really bother me. And very importantly, when I look into the EVF to take a photo, it's just for what? Less than 10 seconds. I'm not going to peep into the EVF for a few minutes or for half an hour to inspect something. So the EVF to me is important, but it's not critical. And this EVF on the XE4 doesn't bother me at all. I have no issues with it. Now, point number 3 is the transfer of images from this camera to the device. 2 points. The Fujifilm app is not really the best out there. I agree. It takes some time to set up in the camera, but once you got it dialed in, okay, the transfer of images is simple, and I like it. I don't have any issues with it. It takes about 4 seconds to transfer each JPEG image into the device. But please bear in mind that by default, the camera transmits JPEG images in shrunk down size, down to 3 megabytes, if I'm not mistaken, to the device, without any indicators on the camera telling you that it is transmitting shrunk down images to your device. So if you have prematurely deleted that image from the camera, you are in trouble. So please, when you get your new XE4, go into the menu. There is something in the menu with the word smartphone, all right? You must turn it off, so that the camera will transmit full size, full resolution JPEG images to your device. And point number 4 a lot of reviewers also talk about the ergonomics of the camera, especially with the placement of the buttons. That I agree, I fully agree, because this camera is light and small. It encourages one-handed operation, but unfortunately, because of the placement of the buttons, you cannot operate the buttons here. You just can't. It's too awkward, see? So to cut a long story short, this camera is best used two-handed. If you are using it single-handed, especially with this thumb grip, this thumb support lever attached, and you want to use it one-handed, at the very most, you can just press the button, the shutter button, and one function button. That's it. That's it. You can't even twiddle or change this shutter speed. No, you can't. And if you try too hard to do too many things with your thumb and forefinger while using it single-handedly, it is highly possible that this camera will fall out of your grip and fall to the ground. So you need a wrist strap or something like that, please. So please bear in mind, this is not a GR3 or a GR3X designed for one-handed usage. All right. Point number 5. This camera, because it is so small and so light, it actually begs for lenses that are small, small, compact, high performance. And at the moment, I'm using 35mm 2.8. If you use, the issue is if you use 35mm 1.4 or any other bigger lenses, when you hold it, it doesn't feel very balanced. It is front heavy. So if front heaviness is an issue to you, then you need to consider. You really need to consider. Because although it is small, it is light, it is compact, when you hold it to your face, it is actually a bit difficult to operate all these buttons. It looks easy, but when you grip it with both hands up against your face like this, the size is actually a double-edged sword. So sometimes we actually feel more comfortable with a camera which is bigger, but for me, a bigger camera, slightly bigger, like an XS10 with very good ergonomics, I don't like its shape, I don't like the design. You see, I like a rangefinder style. That's why I'm willing to live with this slightly substandard ergonomics of this camera, because I am an appearance junkie. I love the looks of the XE4. So other than those few points, I don't think there's anything really wrong or really great about this camera. In my country, this camera is not cheap, and in my opinion, it is overpriced because it does not have IBIS, it does not have weather sealing. So because of that, I feel it's just overpriced, but I like its shape, and that's why it's just right for me. And one last point, the thing that made me want to buy a camera is because I wanted the kind of visual signature that no smartphone can give me. And that visual signature is that of a 50mm full frame look, big aperture look. And that's why I decided to buy the 35mm 2.8 to give me more or less that kind of look. And I will be buying more lenses in the future, 35 and above, because if I need something that is wide angle, I will go back. I will still maintain using my smartphone for most of my shooting because it's very convenient, it's always on my body, but when I need that kind of look that the smartphone cannot give me, I will use the XE4. So that's my opinion on the XE4. If you have any comments, please write them down below, and so that we can share. All right, thank you.